I used to work at McDonald's for a short time when I was younger. I worked at the McDonald's near where I lived, and most of the times I would be a cashier. So one night I was working until 10 o'clock. Earlier in the evening, things got really busy. There was a lot of people coming in at around 5 p.m. Now, I had just recently started for the night at that time, and I was working at the front counter taking orders. I remember that a man walked up to me, already looking angry about something. When he got up to me, he said that his order was messed up and he wanted another one for free. Now, he didn't have any food with him, and I asked him if he had a receipt. The guy said no to this as well. So I asked him where the food was, and he said that he threw it away because it was wrong. Then he demanded us again to remake the order, and said that he also wanted a gift card for the trouble. I asked the guy when he came in and ordered the food that we messed up. I had only been working for like 20 or 30 minutes, but I hadn't seen this guy. I was guessing that he ordered before I was here, maybe. The man wouldn't tell me when, though. He just said earlier. I asked him to specify, and he refused. Without any information, he could have easily just been trying to get free food, and I had a feeling that's exactly what he was doing. He started getting more angry, though. When he raised his voice, I told him to leave. Another one of my coworkers also noticed when the guy was getting angry, and he came over to us. At that point, the angry man got my name, and then claimed that he was going to report me to corporate. I didn't really care, though. I didn't think he actually would, and even if he did, I hadn't done anything wrong. Finally, the man stormed out of the restaurant. I told my coworker about the situation, and I was told that the guy was completely wrong for acting that way. It made me feel a little better to hear that. We were pretty busy, so I got back to work with helping customers, and soon I had mostly forgotten about the interaction. When it was later that night, though, things quieted down significantly. By about 9 o'clock, I was finally almost done. We weren't getting customers nearly as often, but I was still working behind the front counter. I remember at that point, I noticed a man walk in. It was the same guy who had been yelling at me before, and he seemed just as angry, if not more. He walked right up to me, and before I had a chance to say anything, he started cursing me out. I remember telling him to leave, but he just completely ignored me. He was going on what could be considered a legendary rant. After yelling at me for a minute or so, he then walked around and started to go behind the counter. This was obviously for employees only. And at that time, because of how quiet we were, I was the only employee behind the counter. When the man got back there, he started walking in my direction. I yelled at him to leave, which a coworker in the kitchen area overheard. I was afraid that the man was going to attack me or something. But instead, he grabbed a bunch of cups and then slammed them to the floor. By that point, my coworker arrived at the scene and also tried telling the guy to leave. It was really no use, though. The guy then went over and punched one of the computers that we had. He then basically started picking everything and anything up that he could reach and slamming it to the ground. My coworker told me to call the police, so I got out my phone and hit 911. The man then walked out from behind the counter and walked over to the drink machine. He took a bunch of the things over there, such as straws and ketchup packets, and started tossing them around. Then the guy said a couple more curse words, took a chair and flipped it over, and then finally left. After he was gone, I was on the phone with the police. They arrived a short time later, but the man was gone. We had a video of him, though, from security footage, which we turned over to them. I got off work and left after that, and my manager handled the rest. I'm not really sure what ended up happening. I assume that the man got banned from the McDonald's location. I only worked there for a couple more months, and I never saw him again. He was by far the worst customer that I ever encountered, though.
Hey everyone, we truly appreciate your support. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel for more upcoming stories and exciting content.
I live by myself in an apartment. My unit is on the first floor of a pretty new building, and I've lived here for 2 years now. Last year, though, something really strange happened. It was nighttime, and I was in the living room of my apartment. I think it was maybe 8 p.m. or so. There was then a knock at my front door. I didn't know who it would be, but I got up to go check anyways. When I arrived at the door, I looked out and no one was there. This was really weird. I opened up my apartment door and looked out into the hallway. When I did, I still saw no one, but there was a McDonald's bag right in front of the door. At first, I thought this had to be a mistake. Maybe it was DoorDash or something, and they left it at the wrong door. I picked it up and looked at it, but didn't see any kind of receipt or anything indicating who it was for. There was no name or anything. I looked inside the bag, and there appeared to be just one burger inside. I wasn't really sure what to do, but it didn't seem to be a DoorDash. Maybe one of my friends did this for some reason. I really wasn't sure, but I was hungry, so I had the burger. After that, I told a couple of my friends about it, the only ones that would possibly do something like that, but they all denied it, so I was really confused. I thought maybe it was sent to the wrong address. Well, several nights later, basically the same thing happened. Once more, there was a knock at my front door. This time, it was later at night though. I think it was almost 11 o'clock. I went to the door again, and nobody was there, but there was another McDonald's bag right outside. I looked inside of it again, and it appeared to be just one hamburger like it was before. This was really confusing, but this time, I left the bag there. Maybe on the chance that it was a mistake somebody would see. The next day though, the bag was still there. Eventually, I had to throw it away, and sadly the burger went to waste, so I didn't feel guilty for eating the other one. But I was really confused as to why I kept getting these McDonald's deliveries. A few days went by of nothing. Then I got another one. Once more, I was at home, and it was sometime at night. It was maybe 9 or 10 o'clock, and there was another knock on the door. As soon as I heard it, I got up and ran for the front door. By the time I arrived though, the person was gone, like every other time. I opened up the door and looked out into the hallway, but didn't see anybody. At that point, I looked down, and of course, there was another McDonald's bag. I brought it in and opened it up, but there was no food in the bag at all this time. The only thing inside was a standard-sized piece of paper, and on the paper was a printed photograph of me. It was the exact picture of myself that I had on my LinkedIn page. I thought this was the weirdest thing ever. I had absolutely no idea who was doing this or why. For the next few days, I was on edge at night, waiting for a person to knock on the door again, but they never did. And since that happened, I haven't received any more strange deliveries or had any more knocks on my door. I still don't know how to explain it. I used to work at McDonald's several years ago. I worked there for a total of 6 months, and for the most part, I enjoyed it. When I was there, I just worked part-time though, so I'd get like 20 or 30 hours a week. One night, I worked late. Things were pretty quiet for the last few hours, but it had been busy earlier. After I got off of work, I left McDonald's and drove back home. I lived alone in an apartment during this time. It took almost 10 minutes to get back, so it wasn't that far. However, I did have to make several turns. I wasn't really paying that close of attention, but I did notice that the same car drove behind me for most of the way back. When I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot, the car behind me did as well. However, it was a big complex and lots of people lived there, so I wasn't concerned at all. I got out of my car and didn't even notice where the other vehicle had gone. Then I went inside my apartment and was about to shower and change. But before I had a chance to, I heard somebody try opening my apartment door. This caused me to pause where I was and listen. I honestly couldn't believe what I had heard. I mean, nobody ever tried entering my apartment before. Could this have been an accident? Or was somebody actually trying to enter my place? As I stood there, things were silent for a few seconds. I figured that whoever it was gone now, and I decided to walk over to the door. When I got there, I looked through my peephole to the other side, but when I did, I saw this man standing there. He was somewhat tall, with dark hair, and was wearing a sweatshirt. I had no idea who he was. But then I wondered if this was the same person driving home behind me. Who had been driving behind me. Maybe they were following me, but I could not think of why. For a moment, I considered answering the door because I was curious, but I quickly decided not to. I kept watching through the peephole, and the man stayed there for a while. He was just looking around, and then finally, he walked away. I was really confused by this. Maybe it was a mistake, but overall, I didn't really think that it was. Well, for the rest of the night, things were fine. I did not see the guy again, and there were no more knocks on my door or anything like that. The next day, I had work again at McDonald's. I was once again working another night shift. Well, a few hours in, things were fairly quiet, and I remember noticing a man walk in. For a second, I didn't think much of it, until I recognized the guy. I realized that it was the same man that had tried entering my apartment the night before. I couldn't believe it. I was working at the register and taking people's orders. However, the man did not come up and order anything. Instead, he immediately turned and walked into the dining room area. I watched him take a seat and was facing me. He did not immediately look at me though. He just appeared to go on his phone, and I tried my best to just ignore him. Over the next hour or so, I looked back to the man several times, and he stayed there. I was confused as to what he was doing. He appeared to be looking at me several times, but I didn't know why. After he was there for maybe 2 hours in total, the man got up and left. He never bought anything and didn't say a word. I was glad that he was gone though. I had maybe an hour left of my shift. It went by pretty good, and then I was off and could go home. I left McDonald's and then headed out to my car. Once inside, I started driving back to my apartment again, and this time, I was paying better attention. I noticed the same car following me back. I realized that this was more than likely the same man, but why was he following me? I went all the way back to my apartment complex, but right before I pulled in, I turned, and the car turned with me. I went around the block, but then decided to actually go to my apartment. The car stayed behind me the entire time. I pulled into the parking lot, and the car followed me and parked in a space not too far away. Once I parked, I got out of my car really fast and started walking for my apartment. When I did, I heard the man leaving his car and footsteps quickly approaching. I looked over and saw the man running towards me at full speed. I just started running like crazy. I went for the door. When I got inside the apartment building, had a maybe 30-foot lead on the guy. Then I ran down the hallway from my door and scrambled to unlock it. As I was doing so, I heard the man running at me. That was one of the most terrifying moments I've ever experienced, but thankfully, I got the door open just in time. Then I slammed it shut behind me and locked it. The guy tried entering, and then started banging on the door when it wouldn't open. I called the police at that point. The guy then walked away, and I thought he was gone for good. But then maybe 5 minutes later, he returned. First, he calmly knocked on the door, but then suddenly started loudly banging on it. I still did not know what this guy's problem with me was. He continued for another minute or two, until the police got there. They started talking to the guy, and I heard some yelling. Eventually, I guess the man tried to run away, but the police caught up with him and he was arrested. After that, I never saw him again. I didn't work at McDonald's for much longer, and I also moved out of that apartment building. To this day, I never found out why the guy was following me. It was really weird and creepy. When I was 16 years old, I got my first job working at a department store. It wasn't my favorite job of all the ones that I've worked, but when I got it, I was very excited. Just being able to make money at 16 years old was really nice. I had recently got my driver's license, but I would have to earn enough money to buy a car. In the meantime, my parents would drive me to and from work. We did not have an extra car to spare for me to drive around. But it wasn't too big of a deal, because my parents could always get me to work for my shifts on time. Plus, we only lived about 10 minutes away from the store that I worked at. By my store, right across the street, was this McDonald's. Other than that, there wasn't much else in the immediate area. So one night, I was working pretty late until the store closed. After I got off of work, I saw a text from my mom saying she was picking up my little brother first. Then she would come a little bit later to get me. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Maybe she would be there 20 minutes later. But the store that I was working at was closing, so I walked over to the McDonald's across the street. Like many other McDonald's, it was open late. I was also pretty hungry. Things looked quiet, and when I got inside, I saw that it was. There was one employee behind the counter, and nobody appeared to be eating inside. So I ordered something small, I don't remember what, and then I got it. I walked into the dining room, and that's when I noticed that there was actually one other person there. It was a man sitting at a booth in the corner, and he was kind of slouched over a little and reading a book. The guy had long straight hair and a goatee. I went and sat in another booth on the other side of the restaurant, by a window looking out to the parking lot. Then I texted my mom, and I told her that I would be waiting for her at the McDonald's. I sat there eating and going on my phone for the most part. My mom soon texted me back, letting me know that she would be there in about 10 minutes. I remember that I was sort of facing the other guy in the restaurant. Not directly, but he was somewhat in my vision if I looked to the right a little bit. When I did, I noticed that he appeared to be just staring at me, and he was staring at me for a really long time. This was kind of weird. I looked away and tried to ignore him, but sometime later, I looked back, and he was looking in my direction again. I didn't really know what he was doing, but it was kind of creeping me out a little bit. Several minutes went by, and I was hoping that my mom would get there soon. I didn't particularly like being alone in the restaurant with this guy, whoever he was. Then I noticed headlights in the parking lot and a car entering. It looked just like my mom's car, so I got up and started walking for the doors. I felt much better when I saw this. I walked out and left the McDonald's and started heading towards the car driving in the parking lot. But that's when I noticed that it wasn't actually my mom's. It was a very similar SUV to the one that my mom drove, same color and everything. But it wasn't quite the same model, and probably not the same year either. I could tell that it was different, and I was really disappointed. And then, the car ended up turning around and leaving. Meanwhile, as I stood there in the parking lot, I noticed a man leaving the McDonald's. He started just standing around, maybe 20 feet away from me. I wasn't looking at him, but it felt like he was looking at me. This was making me really uncomfortable, so I just started walking. I didn't really know where I was going to go, but I was just walking in the parking lot. There was literally just one car there. I'm not sure if it belonged to the man, or to one of the McDonald's employees that was working. As I walked, I heard the man start to walk after me in the parking lot. I kept going, but I was now extremely nervous. Suddenly, I saw my mom. She was driving down the street, and within a few seconds, she entered the McDonald's parking lot. I quickly ran to the passenger side door and got inside. Then I closed it and locked it. My mom asked me who that man was. I told her that he was acting weird and kind of following me. Then he started walking back towards the entrance of McDonald's. We left after that. I feel so lucky that my mom showed up when she did, or else I don't know what I would have done. I'm not sure why that man was seemingly following me around, but it was really creepy.